Thank you. So as just introduced, I'm Phil Ladler. I head up the consulting practice at STL Partners. And those of you who are not familiar with STL Partners, we are a research and consulting firm really looking at growth opportunities within telecoms. And I'm delighted to welcome today's session on AI efficiency and profit. So really looking at how operators are adopting AI to drive efficiency and profit. And to do that, I will allow the panelists, Emmanuel, Carla, and Ahmed, to introduce themselves briefly before we kick off. So perhaps start with yourself, Emmanuel.
Yes, hello, Philip. Can you hear me well?
Yep, we've got you loud and clear.
Outstanding. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Emmanuel Hemricourt de Grunne. I work at Proximus ADA, which is a center of excellence for AI for the main Belgian telecom company Proximus. And I'm AI program manager lead. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And Carla, please introduce yourself.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for the invitation as well. I'm Carla Penedo, Executive Director for Cognitive Automation and AI at Celfocus. If you don't know, Celfocus is a European high-tech system integrator focused on next-gen intelligence that combines advanced AI, automation, and human expertise to create more autonomous organizations. It's a pleasure to participate in this session and meet you all.
Thank you, Carla. And Ahmed, yourself, please.
Okay, hello everyone. So I'm Ahmed Hany. I'm a big data chapter lead at Vodafone. Over the past years, I have been working on multiple data science projects to support the network planners and optimizers to take AI-driven decisions. Also, before that, I have been building and optimizing indoor radio systems for high-capacity buildings. So I consider myself lucky to have both telco and data science backgrounds. Very happy to be here in the panel and looking forward for an interesting discussion.
Brilliant. So I think today's panel is going to focus on, I think, primarily use within operators, but we can certainly look at how operators are looking to monetize externally AI. But starting with that, with yourself, Ahmed, since you're on the screen, what would you say the top 2, 3 use cases? Let's start with two. The top 2 use cases that you're adopting at scale, and here I'm going to go to Gen AI rather than just AI because operators such as Vodafone have been adopting large language models, machine learning for not large language models, but machine learning for a while. So that's not new. But if we just focus on Gen AI, where do you see the kind of the top 1 or 2 use cases that you're adopting?
So I would say one of the top use cases is communicating with structured data. So instead of having a senior leadership team to write a query to understand the data and go to this level of skills, so they can just write in natural language or plain English prompt to have insights about the radio data, how the network is going. So this is one of the very interesting Gen AI use cases.
And sorry, you say leadership here. This is the technology leadership. These are folks in the NOC. Who are we talking about, the users here?
So this is the beauty of Gen AI. So we're talking about technical leadership or non-technical leadership team to understand what is going with the network with just plain English questions.
And you've seen a big uptake of that particular use case. A lot of use. Great. Okay. And would you point us to another? That was one. Is there a second?
The other one is so not the structured data, so the unstructured data. So also the document management use cases. So instead of looking into PDFs and taking a lot of time to understand it, so now it's searchable. You can just ask questions on top of these documents, and then you can get answers, summarize a lot of information, summarize a lot of documentation. So this is also one of the key use cases.
any particular functions where you're seeing adoption, or is that across the board? Which
It's
functions?
again across the board. So for networks team to understand the documentation about the equipments that they are having, also for financial teams to have information about contracts, invoices, and so on. So it can support multiple aspects.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Carla now and ask the same question, but obviously, Carla, it's more a question of the operators you work with. I know you work closely with Vodafone, but you work with other operators. So what would you say, based on the experience of working with multiple operators, are the top 1, 2 use cases that you're seeing around Gen AI adoption?
So although generative AI first gained traction in customer support, cloud providers quickly began offering Gen AI as a service. And I believe other areas are now emerging with even greater potential. So picking on the 2 use cases, I would say field service operations and conversational operations. This according also from our experience and what we see in the market. Okay. So the first use case, the field service operations, covers the end-to-end journey for a field technician, from driving to the site while listening to contextual information about the issue, to on-site troubleshooting with remote visual support and recommended actions, visual quality checks, and finally issue closure using speech to text. And the impact here is significant. So fewer repeat visits, lower intervention costs, faster repairs, and higher first-time resolution rates. Then the second one, conversational operations for natural language diagnosis and root cause analysis of network issues. And a solution for this would detect anomalies from performance KPIs, correlate them with topology modeled as knowledge graphs and with alarms as well, and also consult a curated golden book of vendor and internal documents to pinpoint causes using agentic AI. And this use case, as you can imagine, has also a major impact. So it can detect more issues and earlier than the traditional static rule-based fault management systems, and also significantly accelerate root cause identification.
Sorry, and the key users for that, is it the NOC, is it the technical operations team, or is it actually closer to the customer-facing teams? Who are the key users for that use case?
The field service operations is the workforce.
Yeah.
Of the field technicians, and the conversational operations is the technical, the engineers that need to understand what is going on the network as fast as possible and pinpoint a root cause.
Okay, so that sounds like they're more NOC based. It's more of a service assurance. They're more dealing with issues generating, so it's not necessarily customer facing. It's not necessarily, but it's certainly those teams there that are implicated in that. Okay, that's interesting and great. Couple of examples. Now I'm going to just turn to Emmanuel, to ask him, has he got a couple of use cases, hopefully slightly different, that he's seeing as sort of priority, or that are in adoption, in production use cases with Gen AI?
Yeah, thank you. If we're focusing on Gen AI, it's quite similar to what Carla mentioned. I could say that we have assistance for sales agents, for example, that improve search and summarization. So the main focus in terms of at scale example will be really customer interaction automation and augmentation. These are the main sector in which we scale, I would say. Writing assistance to help the agents with correction, translation, tone, optimizations for agents, I mean human agents in this case, of course. And we had a strong adoption around HR assistance for our employees. The legal system in Belgium can be quite complex, and you always have interesting question that with an assistant that should know the Proximus lingua franca, if I may say.
Right. Okay, so that's great. So one is really customer facing, sales agents, augmenting them, helping them with their productivity, but also helping them improve their dialogue. So it's kind of a mixture of a mentor kind of coach, but also augmentation and summarizing and writing up sort of speech to text, summarizing conversations. So that's
Exactly.
customer facing. And then the other one is more internal, which is helping employees to, resolve, manage, identify HR policies and navigate the complexity of that. So great examples across the organization, all of which are being deployed at scale. I want to come back. Are you able to quantify or measure the benefits from this? Because you've talked about, augmentation. It's always difficult to translate augmentation into benefits. It's easier to translate time saving. How have you tried to evaluate the impact of these initiatives?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, of course. So we measure higher customer satisfaction typically with our FAQ Gen AI search, for example.
Okay.
Those are the kind of things we can objectively measure. We have higher first time right for tech and service code. I think Carla mentioned something quite similar. In terms of employee productivity, we do surveys. We survey them to see how much time they think they can spare per day. We see it with a custom solution, but also off-the-shelf solution that we monitor. It can be GitHub Copilot, for example, but this is more on the developing side, of course.
Sure.
But we can see really a significant amount of minutes spared per day per employee on average. This is the kind of thing we measure, and we, of course, measure economic value with concepts such as CapEx and OpEx savings or avoidance, revenue generation or protection.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. So you are measuring across the piece. You're not just throwing Gen out and hoping. You're managing the performance, the ROI, and so you've got some discipline around, is this delivering what we anticipated? Is it producing the benefits? And they're quite complex benefits, right? Higher first time rights, customer satisfaction, and the FAQ. So you are having to measure lots of different aspects because, of course, the impacts aren't, they're not just one attribute. They're across different attributes, different KPIs. So you have to reassemble those to get the view. Yes. Thanks. I want to just come back to Carla. Same question, really, Carla, which is the examples that you've given us on the field service. Let's start with that one. That's probably the easier one to measure, although it's interesting that it's helping the field service throughout the life cycle. So it's not just at one point in the field service. So you're having to measure lots of different aspects. But I guess that's also being measured in terms of the outcomes and the benefits.
So for field service operations, the first one that also the client with whom we were working with was targeting was reduce the repeated visits, and we reached around 30% of reduce repeated visits and everything that relates with that. So the best customer experience for sure, lower intervention costs, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's the first time right. Big improvement. First time right it was a big improvement, and because of that, many others also apply, as you can imagine. So, but overall speaking, there can be many benefits. Like Emmanuel already mentioned some, but there can be different types of KPIs. Emmanuel also mentioned operational, this first time right, minimum time to detect, minimum time to resolve. It can be incident volume, escalations avoided as well. Okay. Financial, so the OpEx reduction, the revenue uplift. We can have quality KPIs, so detection accuracy. This is important also for the second one that I mentioned. The false positive rate, root cause correction. Okay, now you're getting into that second use case. Yes, exactly. Validation from human experts. Okay, so you're getting that survey as well. So you are checking survey to what extent. And the other one I thought would be interesting to explore with you, that I've come across, is the time it takes to get field or service engineers and technicians accelerate their onboarding. How quickly can they learn? Are you measuring that as well? Are you measuring the ability to onboard new individuals more effectively? That is also one of the goals. So we want also to be able to standardize in order to provide the same level of service independently on the experience of the person that is addressing and solving the issue. So what we did, for instance, for that use case, the field service operation was we started, and this I believe is the typical approach as well. We started with a controlled pilot with offline data. Then we selected, or the client selected a set of people to test it, but online in the field. Then we get that feedback. We were able also to iterate the algorithms, the recommendation algorithms. For instance, I'm talking about in specific the recommendations that they had on the field to do what they need to do correctly at the first attempt. And then we went to the next phase, which is deploy that in production. So it needs to be phased also to guarantee that they understand, they give feedback, because the feedback is very important, so that we can proceed to the next.
So it was like a pilot, an initial pilot. Partly the pilot was to validate, more like a controlled experiment, to validate the outcomes, but also it was to improve and fine tune the applications themselves and make them, perhaps adapt them to make them more user friendly or more effective, or just wean out the bugs by putting them out in the real field for a pilot.
Yes, tested live with them, with their feedback, and then move forward.
Okay. And out of interest, how long does that whole program take?
So in terms of POC, it can be a matter of weeks, like eight weeks. It depends on the complexity of the use case. It can be 4 to 8 weeks. Then some more weeks to validate and to get the feedback. Okay. And then it also depends on the clients, of course, because depending on the security constraints and the requirements and everything that we need to have in place,
you need to have access
to put it in production.
And a slightly sort of relevant question to some of our audience: how do you contract for this? Do you contract on an outcomes basis? Do you contract on a fees? Maybe you don't want to answer that, but it'd be interesting, I think, for other operators to understand how can they partner with companies like Celfocus to help them with delivery on this.
Nowadays, there can be different ways, different approaches. I believe that generally speaking, CSPs are more concerned about the business value, and that's why this is a typical approach to start with the POC. Okay, so it is proving the value. So we want this, in fact, to move forward, or if it is not getting the value that they wanted or they expected, so okay, they can identify other priorities and move with other use cases. So it depends, but mainly I would say that the main point is to prove the value before moving forward.
Okay, that's really interesting, and I'm going to come back to the POC question in a moment, Carla, because we've seen quite a lot of operators stuck at POC, and I'm going to come back to this question. But first, I'd like to get back to Ahmed and just ask how Vodafone has been measuring the success of those initiatives that you mentioned earlier, the structured and the unstructured data access.
Yes, so for the initiatives, I think the main thing that we are measuring is the customer satisfaction, how simple to use to access the data and generate insights. So instead of looking just in a static dashboard, or you have to go deep into the data itself. So the Gen AI use cases normally support from a network or a technical engineer to senior executives. So it can support both of them to generate insights that they can use easily. So I think this is the main
right thing. Yeah, because you've got a very broad range of users, right, across multiple functions. Exactly. So it's very hard to measure the hard benefits, particularly because you're actually getting people to do something they weren't doing before. So it's quite hard to do before and after, since particularly, you're saying, well, you're providing access to a group who didn't. Sure, there's a benefit. Very hard to measure that because you don't have it before. You don't have a baseline, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I can see that is quite tricky. So that's going to have to be survey based, satisfaction based. You're going to have to ask them.
This is what we normally do, and also within the replies from the Gen AI, we ask for feedback, and based on the feedback, we try to optimize more the output.
And I guess you could also monitor use level, right? I mean, they're coming back for more. That's a good sign.
Exactly.
If they try it and then they give up, probably not a good sign, right?
Exactly.
So utilization rates are also helpful indicators of adoption, and you presume if they're adopting it, it's because they're finding it helpful for their work, right?
Yes.
But harder to abstract that. So I was really coming on to the next question, which was, we've seen a lot of pilots get stuck in POC, and I want to just understand. These ones, obviously, you have got them out of POC, but you will also be working on some other ones. And I want to understand what's been harder to move from proof of concept or a pilot or a lab into production. Where have you seen more difficulty in making that transition?
So I would say the most important thing is the data itself. So we need to have the data ready, and not just a big size of data that is enough, but also to have it as high quality, to be consistent, reliable, to be used. So this is a very important thing. And also we'll add to what Carla already mentioned. So the security and the privacy approvals. So we need to be within the guardrails, not breaching any guidelines. So these are two main aspects that sometimes make the change from POC to production take a longer time.
Right. So your data, which we've heard a lot, data readiness. In fact, we heard that a little bit on the last session. I'll call the end of that. So data readiness and those guidelines, the permissions, security, making sure that there is an inadvertent misuse of data, because these systems are basically opening up silos, and you don't want to expose yourself to inadvertent risks associated with that. Understood. Any other aspects, and I have some I'm thinking of, but any other aspects that make it difficult to transition or introduce some of these into production? No, just those are the main ones you think?
I think yes, those are the main ones.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Carla, and ask the same question. You're working with lots of operators. As you say, the way you work with operators first is to get them comfortable through a POC, but sometimes those POCs do not move forward. And without obviously sharing details of specific customers, where is that difficulty in making the transition from the proof of concept into full productions? Where do you find that those barriers, where does it get hard?
I believe that nowadays most of them do move forward, okay, but it takes time, and it has challenges for sure. So I totally agree with Ahmed. For sure, privacy and security is one of the biggest challenges. So legislation keeps evolving, so we must ensure that the pipelines and the systems fully comply. And in fact, telco architectures already imposed strict security requirements that need to be satisfied before deploying a solution in production. And this is natural, okay, but also typically a very demanding and long process. If we want to go to more technicals, I would say also real-time performance. So guaranteeing that the LLMs deliver low latency responses at scale with the big data, so the full data ecosystem and streaming workloads is also very challenging. And there are many decisions in this regard that needs to be considered. Okay, and finally, I also agree with Ahmed. So I would say also the typical basilar one. So the data quality and integration. So consolidating the clean, trusted data from multiple silos, aligning everything and maintaining up-to-date knowledge for models is also often a major blocker or challenge.
Right, it can slow things down because you end up having to unfreeze the data lake.
But as I mentioned in the beginning, I think the situation is changing. Okay, so I see that most of POCs right now are indeed proving value and then moving forward, but it's still in some occasions a process.
Okay, and Emmanuel, again, you've had some success with these ones, but I'm sure you're working on some other use cases that are still at a trial or proof of concept. And where do you see some of the friction, some of the barriers in progressing those to production?
Well, I think it starts with a good intake process. If you can identify a priori, long before you go to the POC, all potential issues in data explorations or the availability of data,
Okay.
as Ahmed said, it helps to fail fast, let's say. We should also remember that when a POC doesn't industrialize for, let's say, benefit realization related reasons, we
Okay.
should not be afraid to stop it. Just
Yeah.
one personal take on it. But of course, integration complexity in an old company such as Proximus, who've been there for some time, legacy systems is not always compatible with off-the-shelf solutions. That's
Yeah.
why you need some custom integration. This is definitely something hard sometimes to achieve. Having the data pipelines automate feeding the data, but also making sure this data is well governed. And unstructured data is specifically a challenge because you must make sure all metadata are there, that it's curated, that it's shareable, that an agent, for example, or a Gen AI model will not ingest and produce results that should not be visible to the wrong audience. So you have also, you must be quite targeted in terms of knowledge management here, especially unstructured. And of course, yeah, the security challenges are harder, especially for agents.
Are there not better tool sets for that activity now on the market for cleaning that data, metadata?
Well, there is, but it's not always completely easy to integrate within the Proximus ecosystem. That's where a custom approach can generate a lot of value as well.
Okay.
But yeah, there are some interesting solutions in the ecosystem that can help doing that. Also, automating the generation of data pipelines, for example, this is a very interesting take on that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's very challenging to curate unstructured data because if you spend too much time curating it, then you may lose some of the value, right? So it's that compromise of cleaning it up but not destroying the value while you do that, and a bit of a challenge. Thank you. Those are helpful. I mean, one of the interesting things I wanted to explore, and maybe it relates to some other use cases more. None of you have mentioned the skills or issues around accountability and changes in accountability, or the kind of an organizational impact of introducing the technology as a challenge. And yet I heard that from some operators and some vendors that they find sometimes you've got a well, who's accountable problem. Yeah, you can't blame the AI because at the end of the day, there's always an individual or a function. Do you not encounter any issues with that? I guess some of these, the ones you've mentioned, most of them, the accountability is still crystal clear. But as you move, and we're going to get into a conversation about agentic, but as you move to greater levels of automation and adoption of AI, are there not issues with clarifying, roles, accountabilities, and potential resistance because of changes in that?
Well, two aspects to your question. There is one aspect related to the operating model, and I mean, HR-wise, the new roles that would be needed to be, for example, a knowledge manager, to be responsible for what is being fed to the model. This is one thing. And this is an ongoing reflection. It's also about having Spark's champions and communities in each business unit that would be able to take a part of that responsibility in terms of business value, for example, not only what model spits out, if I may say, but in terms of overall understanding of what it's supposed to achieve. And well, in Belgium, not sure it's the case in Great Britain, but in Belgium, the AI Act also answers those questions with compliance. He was supposed to educate, to improve monitorize, to identify if it's a risk-based approach. As you probably know, the AI Act, so we're supposed to identify what's prohibited, high risk, and so on. I'm glad to say we don't have a lot of high risk models at Proximus for now. There was some reflection to establish if one of those were high risk or not. And the AI Act can also be a compass to see how you would point responsibility and what level of monitoring you need for specific models, for example. But that's an ongoing reflection, especially when it comes to the operating model.
Okay, great. I'm going to come back to this because we're going to get onto agentic before we finish off. And I think with agentic, this question becomes more acute because you have this issue of. But before I do that, popping back to Carla, I mean, particularly Carla for the field service operations, and actually both the use cases you mentioned. Is there not some resistance from the teams here being told, don't they have this slight reluctance of taking instruction from the app? I don't know, but this is true for any system, I guess. But did you have any issues with that and with accountability, with that maintaining that accountability?
I'm not aware of any example or any situation where that happened. That's why we also iterated the model first with their feedback. So and also how you are using the information. Okay. We also it's also part of the AI world, the part of the explainability. So we also do, for instance, a recommendation, but we can explain why we are providing that recommendation. That is also important. But in different, I believe that this type of questions can have different impacts depending on the use case and on the type of data that you are using. For instance, if you are considering mission critical operations or business flows, first I believe we need to assess if we really want to use Gen AI or agentic AI, if it is the right solution. Sometimes it is not, okay, even though it has huge impact when properly used. And I believe that keeping a human validation step at the end with this outcome presented as a highly digested and decision-ready summary to speed the final decision is a good starting point before doing everything that the machine says to do. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. And coming back to yourself, Ahmed, going back to the two use cases that you expressed, how do you deal with, I don't know, potential hallucination or misinterpretation or these issues, and do you get a challenge if the users adopt findings without any kind of, did you find anything related to that loss of responsibility for the users?
So considering that right now we or at least the use cases that I mentioned are not customer facing, I believe that when they are customer facing, you need to think on that more carefully. And we are using right now more to speed up the analysis, the diagnosis, and the decision process. We are also learning with that. Okay, we already faced many challenges and many more we still have to face in the future for sure. But I believe we are using the same things that everybody are. So using the typical safeguards that we need to have and tools when we are using or implementing this type of use cases.
Right. And Ahmed, coming back to you now, any other issues around adoption, particularly because you've made this available to a very wide user base? So was there either resistance or perhaps potential errors or misunderstandings that emerged from the use of the tools?
So regarding the resistance, so we really need to explain that it's here to make life easy, to simplify things, to make the generation of insights much more faster. So it's not replacing or doing anything else. So regarding the issues and the hallucinations, definitely we had a lot of issues at the very beginning of applying Gen AI to our use cases. But now the LLMs are much more mature, and we already deploy a lot of measures to evaluate the output of the agents. Also working on verifying it with the customer. It needs a lot of prompt engineering, to be honest, to make sure that the output is really concise and accurate and really useful to the customer. But yes, we did have a lot of issues at the very beginning, but now it's getting a lot mature and a lot easier to deal with.
Okay. Yeah. Great. On to agentic. In the last few minutes, we've got over 10 minutes left of this session. So 2026, big year for agentic. I'm anticipating MWC to have agents and agentic and whole agencies full of agents everywhere. Where do you see specifically adoption of agentic AI, the next sort of frontier for yourselves? Where is the big opportunity?
So still working with the network planners and the optimizers. So how to fix a network, where to invest in the network. So merging both the agents looking into the data and the agents looking into the documentations and the knowledge database from the planners and the optimizers, all merging them into one output and one single response is really useful to identify areas where we need to invest in key areas, not just from a network aspect, but also from a commercial aspect. So I think this is one of the key use cases.
That's really interesting. So that's really early in the life cycle, so day 0 activities rather than day 1 or day 2. This is typically network planning is a very painful, laborious process that you don't want to iterate because it's so much effort. So you tend to want to do it once, and then if things move, well, tough. So I guess you want to introduce agentic here to have more iterations, to be able to factor in more changes and adapt your planning and and take into account not just technical aspects, as you say, but more commercial and customer aspects as well. So that's
exactly.
That's about significantly accelerating those iterations, but also much richer insights to feed into
optimize the investment. Exactly. So not just relying heavily on the network performance KPIs, but also merging other aspects to seek areas where we really get the profits.
Great. That's really CapEx focused. Carla, where do you see which kind of use cases showing the best promise, or better still, you're actually seeing live already adopting more agentic, well, agents, frankly, architectures, but agents?
Right now, I believe that one of the most powerful use cases is the conversational ops, okay, for root cause analysis. I already mentioned the other 2 use cases. They are already deployed live. But to give you another example, so recently we deployed we call the protocol intelligence use case, okay, which is also conversational, but for low-level network data. So it digs deeper into the network by analyzing the low-level protocol messages, okay? And the existing tools are costly. They require typically highly specialized operators. And the solution reduces that dependency by automatically interpreting 3GPP, so the standard documentation, okay, and protocol traces to diagnose issues. I believe this is an area that is going to have a high demand. And with this, for example, it can explain why call setup sometimes exceeds 1 second, or calculate the mean latency time for diameter in a given city. Another one, to give you another example, so another shift that we are seeing is moving traditional dashboards to agentic AI that enriches or that generated enriched visualizations and insights from the entire enterprise data ecosystem. So this new era of agentic analytics can also be game changing. So replace, all the manual dashboardings and ad hoc analysis, dramatically reducing the time to insight and enabling these non-technical users also to ask natural language questions and get answers quite fast.
Okay. So here, the first one is more like an ops analyst agent, and the second one, well, more like a BI analyst agent who's
But a new version. The agentic
real-time geek who can recast insights and in business intelligence in a real-time kind of way.
Yeah.
I can see why they would be popular. Everyone wants one of those.
Yes.
So over to you, Emmanuel. Where do you see the promise on agentic?
What I've heard seems very relevant now already. If I can add anything, I would say coding agents as well for vibe coding, quite helpful and has generated quite a lot of efficiencies already. Of course, network operations, if we want to reach autonomous operations, you would have an agentic layer definitely there for example, fiber handling incidents or subscription being able to update a subscription directly with a full integrated autonomous network, for example, that would be an agentic architecture potentially as well, or even customer orchestration, really when someone reaches out to make sure it's either routed back to a human or to the relevant business unit. So in the context of intent detection and rerouting, we see a lot of potential there.
Okay, right. Okay, so there are lots of agents there you've listed potentially to add to the team. A lot of them
they should be governed.
Well, yeah, and yeah, they should be governed. And they won't be asking about HR assistance.
Well, you can just ask for an increase, and maybe the agent will do it for you.
No, I mean the agent itself isn't going to have HR issues. Okay, just to leave things, we focused. I mean, and actually, quite a lot of these use cases, interestingly, are not just cost saving. A lot of them are customer facing, so they're indirectly benefiting. So I'm going to ask each of you, and you're not prepared for this, but you're going to ask each of you, can you think of an example where AI adoption or use cases or agentic AI can lead to, and we've heard quite a lot about indirect revenue generation, but also direct revenue. So any examples of, well, actually we can directly monetize this capability?
I would say
that's easy to find.
Go ahead. Ahmed was there first. I'm Emmanuel, you were not prepped for this, so I've thrown it at you last minute. So let's give you a chance to think about it. Ahmed, you had an answer.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to mention the CapEx use case that you have just mentioned. So the help of the agentic AI to look into the network performance, to look into the commercial aspect, to look into all regions and identify key areas where we can invest, and we can measure the return of investment and the payback period to be a very small time so that we can generate revenue from it. So this is one of the key use cases actually that are very important.
And just to help me understand, you are able to measure direct revenue benefit as opposed to, oh, it's a better experience for the customer and therefore indirectly we'll win market share. How do you feel confident that you can directly measure that?
So we can measure the usage. So
Okay.
for example, whether it's traffic usage, are we selling much more products?
Okay.
This is one of the...
Right. Okay. So you can tie it back to actual expenditure and ARPUs because you know in this area we will see an increase in ARPU from customers in this area by so much because the utilization will go up. Okay. That's great. I'm going to give Emmanuel a little bit more time to think through. Carla, any examples of direct revenue benefits from AI adoption?
So I think that you can also think about Gen AI to drive growth by acting as a productivity multiplier. Okay, many things we already mentioned through this session. So it accelerates the product development through automated coding, prototyping, documentation. It enables fast personalization at scale, And with that, we can boost revenue per customer, depending also on what we want to do and achieve. Also, the fact that it frees skilled staff to focus on other initiatives. Also shifting the mindset to treat Gen AI as an enabler of innovation and faster time to market rather than just a cost cutting tool. And for instance, another example of use case that we are currently working on is for smart capex. And what we are working is to understand how we can have use cases that after implementation or after an initial phase of implementation can start self-funding themselves for the next stages. So I think there are quite interesting initiatives that we can think about it as well.
Okay, great. Last couple of minutes, Emmanuel. Any more thoughts on direct revenue benefits? I mean, I think you certainly listed some good examples of indirect revenue benefits around sort of sales agent performance assistance. Obviously, if the sales agent does a better job, their conversion rates are going to go up. But any examples of direct monetization you can think of?
There is one coming to my mind. There is one of the custom models we did for the firm, for Proximus, that gained some interest from a consulting firm, actually, because it would answer one of their pressing challenges to automate resumes triage, basically, based on certain criteria. So it can happen that a well-developed model that takes into consideration all the complexities you have in a matrix organization can find resonance echo in similar firms where they would be interested to use it. So we have a B2B approach and a B2C approach through another affiliate at Proximus that sells AI directly to their external clients.
Right. Okay.
And that's where custom AI can be monetized and scaled and transformed into a product that can be sold. But of course, you need a product team to do so. So you have this productization, which is a real challenge. But yeah, I have a few examples in mind. And
so that's taking the learning you've developed internally, productizing it, and then making available to your own enterprise customers as tools that essentially have emerged from your own use and adoption.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that example. And thank you all three for what I think has been a fascinating conversation. I hope that the audience thinks so as well. And I'll hand over back to you, Hany.